Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Tuesday evening while the in-season tournament is raging in the NBA. Joining us from Chicago, Illinois, are Midwest and primarily Chicago Bulls and Milwaukee Bucks, but our Midwest reporter, Jamal Collier. What's up, Jamal?
What's up, Brian? How you doing, man?
You've had an interesting day.
Oh
Joining
yeah.
us from Naples, Florida, our front office insider, who had many interesting days in his career, Bobby Marks.
Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Good. It's a little bit early, but we have a report from the Athletic today, guys, that I'm not even exactly sure how to frame it, but basically what it sounds like is that the Bulls are willing to start the process of looking at making some moves off their roster, specifically with Zach LaVine. Um, uh, to me, it seems like it's the Bulls who are, even though the report implies that it's the other teams that are knocking at the Bulls' door, just can't wait to start Zach LaVine talks. It appears to me that it's actually the Bulls who would like to know what Zach LaVine's value might be. Maybe they trade him. Maybe they don't. Maybe they trade him in December. Maybe they trade him in February. Maybe they trade him next summer. But the process of trading Zach LaVine is at least being, begun. And the Bulls, in my view, would probably like to see just what teams might be thinking he's worth right now. Bobby, I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Bobby, but you've seen situations like this before.
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially for a player that's got 4 years and $170 million left, and we're in year one of this new collective bargaining agreement where it's not appealing to have a $40 million player on your books if he's not your number one guy. I mean, that's the reality of the situation here. And I think, and certainly Jamal could talk about this, like we're going to get to a point, Chicago going into Tuesday nights 4-7. They lost in the play-in last year to Miami, lost in the first round to Milwaukee the year before. It's like eventually you have to pick a direction where you're going here, because eventually DeMar DeRozan will be a free agent next offseason. I don't know if we'll ever see Lonzo Ball again. If we're hoping for that, I don't know if that will ever happen. You have not done a great job drafting. Let's face it, right? Patrick Williams, your lottery pick, is now coming off your bench and is shooting 33% from the field. And Dallin Terry, who you drafted a year ago, I see more press releases about him going back and forth to the G League team.
Yeah. And the guy that drafted Julian Phillips this year can't see the floor. Those are two pretty big misses out, along with Patrick Williams, of just like guys who are not helping them at all. This current team.
You've got to eventually pick a path here. And I think the path is it's going to force you. The decisions, not really LaVine just because he has 4 years left, but some of the other players, like the guy on the roster that's probably got the most value is Alex Caruso. I mean, that's like the reality of it all here. But it will be interesting to see what if any value LaVine has out there. It's not the 2 to 3 first round picks type deal. And I think if you're Chicago, I think, can you rebuild or retool without like basically tearing it down? Can you do what Indiana has done, where you moved off of Sabonis for Halliburton, Hield, and you took a step back, but you still had some placeholders there with Miles Turner, and you were still competitive here. And that's the decision that Chicago is going to have to face here.
You mentioned Indiana, and they're kind of just a funny example, comparison to the Bulls, just because they end up with Halliburton, who's in that 2020 draft where the Bulls drafted Patrick Williams, and when you look at the Bulls in that position there, they needed a point guard really badly. They haven't had one for years. If they would have been the team, four, and I think Halliburton went at 11 or 13. I can't remember off the top of my head now, but if they would have been the team to grab Halliburton there, just think about how different this franchise could kind of find itself. years later. But as far as now in the Levine conversation, I think one thing that is especially prudent is what happened here is Tuesday night as we're talking in Chicago, and that was the Champions Classic college basketball. Kind of one of the biggest nights of the year for college basketball, where really representatives, general managers, and such from all 30 teams are going to be here in Chicago at the United Center, scouting those games and scouting some pretty big, high-profile games. And I think, I would expect with that report coming out earlier on Tuesday, it's sort of a perfect time for the Bulls to
Interesting.
sort of just, there's a lot of people out there that maybe want to connect with the Bulls about that report, about what happened, about sort of what their actual interest is in moving Zach. So I expect that would be a hot topic of conversation as the entire league comes on Chicago and the Bulls are sort of playing host unofficially to that.
Yeah. Bobby, I know it's summer league. There's a lot of actual in-person meetings where trade discussions come to fruition. Maybe at All-Star, but is that a real thing that when everybody gets together that it increases trade talks, or is that just something people say?
I think it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I mean, I think where we are right now is that we're in mid-November, and I think teams are still evaluating. The Harden situation was so different than everything else because it was a player that wanted to be traded, in Philadelphia, basically wanted to move off from him. Like that, that and Jimmy Butler from when Jimmy got traded from Minnesota to Philly are two unique November type trades. Like the teams are still in that evaluation period, that 20 to 25 game evaluation period. We get to mid-December when restrictions are lifted on free agents who sign contracts. That's when you start to see things heat up a lot with that. So I don't. Yeah, it's great that 30 teams are in one building here, but I mean, you still got phones. If Rob Pelinka is in LA and Arturas Karnisovas in Chicago, you don't need to pick up Zach LaVine trade talks if Rob's in the United Center for 2 games.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I think this is the beginning of a process. I don't think Zach LaVine's getting traded tomorrow, because Bobby, you educated us on this more than anything. But even if the Bulls reach the decision that they want to make a trade maybe want to trade LaVine, maybe they want to trade DeRozan. I don't know if they want to trade anybody else. A number of players can't be traded until mid-December or mid-January. One of the teams that immediately everyone leaps forward to in a Zach LaVine trade is the Lakers. Well, Bobby, how many guys on the Lakers could you even trade right now? You could trade LeBron and AD. Actually, could you even trade?
No,
AD?
You can't do AD till February 6th.
Right. So the Lakers can't functionally, I don't care if prime Michael Jordan was available right now. The Lakers couldn't really functionally make a trade. And with a lot of their players not until January, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're basically looking, Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura aren't until January 15th. You basically have all the players that you signed. Hey, you've got D'Angelo Russell and Gabe Vincent, Taurean Prince, players like that. All the players on minimum contracts are December 15th players. But I mean, you look at a Lakers team that's over the luxury tax right now, close to the first apron. You got to get within 110% of salaries. Zach LaVine makes $40 million. So when you start adding up the numbers, even if we get to January 15th and the Lakers say, we want to make a deal. We feel like we need a third star, which I think is counter argument to how they've built the roster right now, where it's 2 guys and it's basically a collection of, role players. How do you get to 36? I mean, you can do it, but it could cost you Austin Reeves. Reeves, Russell, whatever to get you there. They've got a pick in the I think 2030 they can move. So it does be presented. It's a challenge here, but as you said, Brian, we're in mid-November here, and trade season really doesn't officially start until at least probably mid-December.
Yeah. So I remember over the summer I was talking about Bradley Beal possible trade, and I was my viewpoint was for the Wizards that the return that they were going to get in a Bradley Beal trade was going to be getting off of that contract. Not only the length and the amount, but also the fact that there was a no trade clause. And just the act of getting that contract off of their books um, was a big part of what they would quote unquote get back. Now, they ended up making a maneuver and basically landing Jordan Poole, it was a return for him. But I don't think it's quite that spot with Zach LaVine because he obviously doesn't have a no trade clause. But considering his knee issues historically, and I am a believer in Zach LaVine, by the way. I really believed he played well with Team USA in the 21 Olympics, and then he had a really good 21-22 season, which is why he got this contract. However, his results on the court are not favorable as to helping a team win. I don't think he's Jamal. I don't think he's like a bad guy, right? I mean, he's not
No, I
viewed that
think
way at all.
yeah, people around the team, love him, love dealing with him. He's I think character wise, people enjoy being around the guy, especially.
Yeah, so do I. I've known him since he was a rookie or second year player when he was in Minnesota. I like him a lot. I thought he really fit in well as a supporting member of a team when he was with Team USA. I don't know, maybe that would work for in a new spot, but I kind of think uh, I kind of think it the amount of money he's owed plus um the knee plus the fact that he hasn't always contributed to winning at the NBA level. I don't think it's quite Bradley Beal level because it's not. There's no trade clause, but I'm not sure that the Bulls would reap a massive reward for a Levine trade.
And that
And
I think, go ahead.
well, Bobby just said a minute ago, and this is something that Bontemps said earlier. I mean, he believes that you could potentially get more return for Alex Caruso than you could get for Zach LaVine. Um,
Yeah,
and I mean, I don't. Some people I think that would be shocking, but you seem to agree with that, Jamal.
yeah, I think there's almost no question. I mean, think about every contender right now at the top of the standings. Denver, Milwaukee doesn't really have the stuff to go get him, but you plug Alex Caruso on Denver. I mean, just think about how they're already obviously one of the best teams in the league, but how his defensive presence, his 3-point shooting sort of next to Jokic, just passing and spacing. Like Caruso could be the guy who sort of decides if the Bulls decide to move him. He could decide the championship, or he could decide which team really is kind of the favorite going into the playoffs. So he's for sure the guy that when you start talking about, future first and unprotected, like that's the guy of trade deadline season that always kind of becomes really enticing. But I kind of want to go back to what you said about when you think about what Zach's return would be. And ultimately why I think, this report, I agree with you that I'm not sure the Bulls have, maybe actually moved any closer today than they were a week or so ago to maybe move in being, at least in the imminent future. And I think that the Bulls have had conversations over the offseason or I think even before that about just preliminary with teams or talks, right? Whatever it is about what Zach LaVine's value as such would be. But I've come under the impression with any team, there are people that have talked to the Bulls that have been a part of those talks. It's kind of one of those where the asking price is the price on the player is so high that teams wonder, well, how available is this guy really? And, I think the Bulls 4-7, and we can all see it exactly why this team after 2 or 3 years here is sort of on a path to nowhere. At least publicly right now, they are still touting, they're sort of playing all the hits about how they think Zach and DeMar, who are both off to really poor shooting starts, and they want to kind of see how those things stabilize. They want to, they still believe that their team is better than they've shown. And I think that, as you guys mentioned it, they still do have a month before, December 15th hits anyways, and other guys can be traded. Like they still have some time to see what this version of this team plays out. And, they've been pretty steadfast, obviously, throughout the past year or 2 years, really. Now, people sort of wondering when the end of this Bulls team that's currently constructed, when it's coming. They've stuck to their guns, and I think that until I see drastically otherwise, their message change on that, I kind of have no choice but to believe these guys, because they have, you know, every moment it seems like the trade is going to come at the deadline or the offseason, or something drastically is coming. They have not made that move. And, you know, I'd be interested to see how bad this has to get for the Bulls to really start thinking about radically rethinking this team.
Well, here's they've got their next 4 games are home. They've got the two Florida teams. Basically, it's almost like a baseball series. You got Orlando twice and Miami twice. I mean, and then you go on the road and you got OKC, Toronto, Boston, Brooklyn, Boston, Milwaukee home. That gets you to December 1st.
Miami won tonight in the in-season tournament, and they 6 in a row now, I think, for the Heat. Yeah, so I don't know, I think this is something to monitor. I don't think it's like red hot. I think it's more interesting if the Bulls are willing to move DeRozan and Caruso than it is that they're moving LaVine. I don't think they would have hung up the phone on anybody calling on LaVine for basically the last 9 months.
100%.
So,
I think Brian, with DeRozan, I think December 30th is a day to kind of circle a little bit here, because once you get past that date, then what he could be eligible from an extension standpoint basically gets shrunk in half, probably more than half, because he's limited to only 2 years, like $60 million, compared to like 3 for $130 because of the restriction rules for players traded here. Of course, that team inherits his bird rights. You can sign him outright as a free agent, but you do run the risk a little bit once you get past December 30th. You don't have as much leverage as you did beforehand.
Yeah, but I mean, the situation is this, Jamal. Like, let's say they win 3 of the next 4 games and they're 7-8.
Yeah,
their situation is not changing. Like, I could be wrong. I don't see them, like, with the way this team is constructed, with where they're at, I don't see them like taking off and winning 18 of 20 and like competing for the top 4.
I agree with you. But I also think that, I think half the league are just kind of look at the standings. Everybody's kind of 5-4, 4-6, somewhere, a lot of system teams that have sort of separated from there, a couple at the top, but I'm not sure they're going to be, I don't know, I'm not sure. There definitely could be a world where they sort of really bottom out the next month. But we saw it last year, the first half of last year, where this team really looked like that they were, just going to sort of not even be in the play-in, on the outside looking in, sort of being toward the bottom of the East. And they rode the wave, stabilized in the second half, start playing out Caruso more, because he's the one guy that when they put him on the floor, they have success. And, all of a sudden they went 14-9 after the break and ended up making the play-in. I think more, yes, I think it would be a drastic turnaround for them all of a sudden to be a top 4 or so team. But if these guys hang around 500, or, DeMar all of a sudden goes on another hot run, and can carry them for a couple of weeks, I think that the decision makers and the team, the way they have operated, they will be inclined to say, we're going to wait this thing out and see if we can, again, I'm sort of unclear of what the actual goal of what this team will do, but I do think that this team.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I've said that on this. I've said that on this
Yeah.
podcast. I mean, like, I don't think they're going anywhere. And I think if they think they're going somewhere, they're deluding themselves. And, I guess, maybe they go 15-5 in the month of December, and this could be thrown back in my face. And I suppose it can be, but I think they're deluding themselves. They think this roster, the way it's constructed, is going anywhere.
Brian, just look at, I mean, I know I hate going back to when Lonzo got hurt, but I mean, look at the body of work. 19-23, since his injury
Yep.
that first year, 40-42 last year, and 4-7 right now. And I get, and what Jamal said, they were really good after the All-Star break there. I think they were first in defensive efficiency. And, Patrick Beverley played a big role in that, certainly. Beverley, Caruso, Levine, DeRozan, and Vooch. That was
Good lineup.
the five you rolled out. And now we're kind of back to, you went out and got Javon Carter, who's probably been one of your better players, at least coming off the bench. Kobe White, fine. Vooch, you signed to $60 million. Torrey Craig, it's like the guys you wanted to go out and get because you were basically ranked in the bottom in 3-point percentage, and you felt like that was where you had to kind of change your offense. Like they're still in the bottom 10. Like that's the reality of it. Like I don't know how things are going to change all of a sudden. Unless there's a soft part of their schedule and there's some injuries down the road from some other teams here. That's like you, as I said, you either you pick a direction now, or what happens in this league is the league forces you to pick a direction, because eventually, like DeRozan is the big wild card because he's a free agent next year. Like you can't just go and say, you know what, we're just going to play it out. And DeMar DeRozan leaves for nothing, because it's not like you're sitting on $50 million in cap space. Like the only way you are we can say, well, we want about cap space. The only way you're a cap space team next year is if it's determined that Lonzo Ball can never play again. So, hey, this was a team that they've built, back in 2021, and change is hard. Like change is hard when you're in the front office to try to pivot from what you're doing. But man, you stay kind of on that mediocrity treadmill and mediocrity, they'll run you off it.
For sure. All right. So to be, definitely pretty interesting, Jamal, and I appreciate your insight. We're going to be talking about that, to be continued. Before we move on to the other team that you cover, the Milwaukee Bucks, we had an incident tonight in Golden State with the Timberwolves. By the way, it's a little bit interesting that some of these in-season tournament games are coming as part of baseball series, where the team will play, and then 2 days later they'll play. The two teams will play the same team in the same venue, but it counts as the in-season tournament. That's happened in a couple of instances this week. That happened, I believe, in this game because the Timberwolves played the Warriors on Sunday. Then the Timberwolves played the Warriors tonight. There was some barking in that game between Draymond Green and Anthony Edwards. Draymond just being Draymond, talking trash at Anthony, Ant coming back and, answering with some incredible play. The Warriors won that game. Ant had 33 points. Well, tonight, there was, and I wasn't, able to watch the build up to it, but Klay Thompson and Jaden McDaniels got into it at center court. Rudy Gobert came in, and different people will disagree. Yeah, it just happened a few minutes ago. Different people will disagree as to what Rudy was doing there. Some people may say he was ganging up on Klay Thompson. Some people might say he was trying to break it up. By the time this podcast will come out, there will be a slate of interviews. So we're kind of reacting to this in real time. But what happened that is most interesting is that as Rudy Gobert was entering into the situation, I mean, he had his hands on Klay Thompson, but Draymond Green flew in from out of the scrum and basically put Rudy Gobert into a chokehold. He grabbed him around the neck with his arm and was dragging him backwards with Rudy's hands flailing around. And Jaden McDaniels and Klay Thompson were ejected from the game, and Draymond Green was issued a flagrant 2 and ejected. By the way, this will be the 18th time and the second time in a week that Draymond has been ejected from a game. It was already a challenging day for the Warriors, Bobby, because Steph Curry has come down with a knee sprain. and he's getting an MRI, and they're going to see what's going on there. If this team loses Steph for any appreciable amount of time, I don't think they will stay above water. But I suspect that they will be headed for potentially reviewing what happened with Draymond here. Draymond has feuds with like 11 different players. And quite frankly, I need a file. I need like a briefing about which, to remind me of all the feuds. But his feud with Gobert includes like warring for the defensive player of the year stuff. And there was that whole insecurity is always loud back and forth tweets several months apart, and other various things. But basically, Draymond and Gobert don't like each other, and Draymond did that tweet after Gobert punched. Who did he punch, Bobby? I forget.
Kyle Anderson. Was it Kyle Anderson?
All right, Kyle Anderson. He punched Kyle Anderson, and they didn't take him to the play-in game, and that's when Draymond, tweeted insecurity is loud, etc. But Draymond has been, probably itching to put Rudy Gobert in a chokehold for some time, whether it's figuratively or literally. And the video on this is crazy. He like flies in from out of nowhere, and just So I don't know what you think is going to happen there, Bobby, but that's a little bit of an interesting development here in season tournament action.
Well, if we go by the guidelines and we look at that prior history is taken into strong account that the league says, then I think we will see a suspension for Draymond Green. It's interesting. Vince Goodwill of Yahoo wrote an article about taunting, and Monty McCutcheon talked about it, and Monty said that taunting can lead to fights and all that stuff. Now I'm thinking, well, we the league's probably going to look at it in a different way now when we do these baseball series. Maybe it's not a good idea to have a regular season game before the play-in game, because this thing probably was brewing from the other night. Minnesota goes into Golden State and beats them, and it's basically like it's a playoff series, right? It's like game 2 of the playoffs here. Now Golden State's coming in with a chip on their shoulder, trying to set the tone here, and here we go.
By the way, we had a situation like this. Philly, Indiana. Indiana played against Philly on Sunday. Maxey puts up 50, and Embiid puts up 37. They dance around on him, not necessarily showing him up, but they have a big time game. Tyrese Halliburton comes back with 33 points, 15 assists, no turnovers. And the Pacers win. Even the series at 1-1. When's game 3, Bobby? But that happened tonight.
If you had Indiana on your bingo card for playing for in-season tournament, one of the 4 representing the East, you might be in pretty good shape there.
I don't think we're going to get this kind of juice in that Bulls Magic back to back this week for me, but never know. Now I got something to look forward to.
Yeah, well, so that'll definitely be a topic of conversation tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see if Draymond talks to the media after the game. I don't know if they'll let him, but I'll be interested to see if he plays the victim card, because he likes to do that. I don't know what his defense is going to be here, because he inserted himself into he escalated the situation.
Yeah, where does he even fly? I was trying to find Draymond's origin. Where does he fly in from?
You need to activate Hawkeye. You need to activate Second Spectrum to watch him, because the altercation, like I said, I don't have the what the buildup was to the exact play, but Jaden McDaniels and Clay got into it, and I don't think either of them have a reputation for being instigators. But Draymond, it is interesting that Gobert stayed in the game. When they reviewed it, they didn't deem that he instigated whatever he was doing as he put his hands on.
He's right. He's right behind these two guys as they start getting into
right. He didn't
run
30 feet to get
length
in.
of the court.
I mean, like Draymond came in like a wrestler coming,
To
from the
save, yeah.
coming running down the stage. He was at the Ultimate Warrior. Like Draymond came in like the Ultimate Warrior there. Um, so yeah, he had him in a grade A chokehold. I assume if you've listened this far, you've already seen it. So we won't talk more about it. But I would tend to agree with you, Bobby, that he's probably looking at a suspension. I also will say that whenever a player faces a suspension, there's an instantaneous reaction from people. That's 3 games. That's 11 games. That's 37 games. It's never, it's never, uh, reactionary in the NBA. So he may merit
Well, yeah, I
suspension
mean
with,
that's a great point too, and it's like it's there's certain you had a lot of different people who were in charge of basketball operations at the NBA at one point. Certainly Rod Thorne and Kiki Vandeweghe, and now we've got Joe Dumars, and everybody kind of like if you're thinking, well, this guy got 2 games for doing that same thing. I think you're going to be wrong as far as what the suspension is going to be because the league looks at it. I mean, it's basically they're opening up a like police investigation after the game, right? There'll be a full investigation, and as I said, like what Green's prior history will come. I mean, it has in the past, and it will probably again in this case.
well, the situation is that like there's going to be, just because he had him around the neck and he did drag him, I don't know, 10, 15 feet, you know, uh, I'm not sure, but he did drag him. And there's some footage that just is not great. It just looks really, really bad. And it's going to be one of those things that is going to be shown outside NBA circles. It's going to be on Good Morning America. It's going to be on, other non-sports shows. And so, the league may face a little bit of scrutiny on this one. So, but I don't know. I'm sure we'll be talking about that with Bontemps and McMahon when we talk on Thursday. Um, all right, to be continued on that one. Jamal, the other team that you spend a lot of time covering, the Milwaukee Bucks, not playing tonight, have won a couple of games in a row now that uh, Dame Lillard came back from that leg injury. They are a team that we've talked about on the pod quite a bit because their record is not awful. It's 6-4, but some of the things about their team are worrisome, particularly their defense. You have covered Milwaukee very closely for the last 3 years. What has been your impression of the way that this team that was really figured to be like a juggernaut has started this season?
Just a lot of weirdness all around. I mean, I think one, you hit it right there, the defense being not, you're so used to that just being kind of the staple with Milwaukee that they are going to defend, they're going to be up near the top of the league. And under Bud, they were for so many years. And I was under the impression that even though they had, moved Drew Holiday, you still have Giannis, you still have Brook Lopez, and that unit is going to still be a strength for these guys. And it just hasn't. I mean, I think that they thought bringing Dame into their sort of defensive culture, their defensive presence and such, right, was going to almost like by osmosis make him a better defender or make him, sort of more equipped on that end. And that has just not been the case. And really just not even just on Dame. Like their entire perimeter defense is just, between Malik and I think, Middleton not playing really any kind of full complement of minutes also hurts them because they just at that end have just not been effective at all. I think there's some weirdness to say the least, or at least like not necessarily a smooth start with their head coach, Adrian Griffin, and it's 10 games in his career. I think just talking to players last night, sort of just about or the other night after their game, just about Griffin. And I think that that was sort of the theme about it in general. It's just like it's 10 games in, he still hasn't sort of really formed what his identity and uh, his how he wants to approach things as a head coach all the way yet. And I think that like for the Bucks right now, that's sort of been their rallying cry is that even though all these things, Dame is also not shooting the ball very well at all. It's 27% from three. Um, you know, talked to Dame about that. And as a matter of fact, in the locker room after that Chicago game on Monday night, and he kind of was admitted that really he felt like he's still getting his legs and everything under him. He didn't play any basketball. He pick up basketball at all in the off season and late in September when he normally starts sort of getting back into game shape because of sort of the trade hanging over his head. And I think that he still doesn't feel all the way back to where he'd like to be, or normally is at this point in the season. So I think for the Bucks, the thing that they're hanging their hat on right now is that the fact that they have been able to still win some of these games, like, despite all the things going on, you could look up and be, 3-7 or whatever it is. And the fact that they do have a record over 500.
There was a stat that they didn't,
I
I think their first 6 or 7 games, they didn't cover in any of the first 6 or 7 games.
I think they're 0 for 9 still. I think.
Were they 0? Okay, well, they've played 10 games. So I don't know if they covered, but that's an indication of a team. Like, look, I don't really care about the betting lines, but I think that's an indication of a team that is underachieving. And for the fact that that they didn't cover, because I think they started 5-2. Does that sound right?
No.
5-2, yeah. 5-2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they lost at Indiana.
Okay. So Jackson tells us they're
Yes.
1-8-1 against the spread.
There it is.
And I think they went 0-6-1 in their first 7 games and were 5-2, which is an indication that maybe they were fortunate to be 5-2.
Yeah.
And I know that they skated on a game or two where they could have gone either way and they got it off of it. But last year, they were the number 1 overall seed. I have to go look at their net rating, but last year, they were pretty impressive from start to finish. And so, look, I know that Chris Middleton has not played that much. And, I know that, they missed some games and now they've, got injuries to their wing players, particularly Jay Crowder, who's out 2 months with a torn adductor muscle, which just sounds very painful.
And he had been really good for them. They got him in the trade last, off season after the whole thing kind of went down in Phoenix, the last trade deadline. And he really never took off at all last year, but he had transformed into really a key piece. I mean, Adrian Griffin was pretty much their 6th man off the bench. I mean, Bobby's kind of their unofficial first guy off the bench, but they were really relying on Crowder pretty heavily early in the season. That's going to hurt them.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, they could win 9 in a row. I'm not, super, focused on it, but they are underachieving.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a fair thing to say.
I'm surprised that Dame and Giannis have not, that transition has not looked as smoothly as you would have thought. The defense, I think, is one thing, and it's certainly been even worse than everybody anticipated. But, offensively, you thought they would be just like a juggernaut with those two, and so far, not really.
Well, I think there was an assumption, Bobby, that the pick and roll was a can't miss situation. But I will say that both Dame and Giannis are used to being the front end of that pick and roll, being the control end of that pick and roll. I'm not sure Giannis is, when Giannis thinks about the pick and roll with Dame, I'm not so sure he's thinking about setting 40 screens. So I still think it's going to work because I think their talent is very compatible, but I do think it does require Giannis to play a style that he's not quite familiar with, and that may be a factor too.
Well, I mean, I think 1-3 on the road so far, given a ton of points. I think 4 out of your next 5 are on the road, but you've got Toronto. I mean, Toronto's going to be interesting. They go up to Toronto on Wednesday. You had just gone up there a week ago, I think, got your doors blown off. And then you're in Charlotte, home for Dallas, at Washington, at Boston. So you could run off 4 or 5 or 5, potentially 5, 5 in a row. There, it's going to be interesting. The Crowder injury is going to force some of their younger players to grow up pretty quick. Whether it be, Marjan Beauchamp, who's played, pretty significant bench minutes, or Andre Jackson, their second round pick from UConn here, because that, they made a concerted effort to go out and get Jackson, Chris Livingston, guys, those younger development players here. I mean, you still have, Pat Connaughton, but what happens when Middleton rests? That's the key. Like, I always thought, like, as getting Lillard and the Giannis combination and kind of figuring that out, that was important. But what you get from Middleton was always going to be the X factor, and certainly how it's gone so far is that they are easing him in, whether it be on a minutes restriction. They're the days of Chris Middleton playing 35 minutes is, that's going to be, certainly not right now. And you lose a guy that can give you, 20, 25 points, from that.
Yeah. I mean, I think if anything, like this is highlighted, the start for them is, like you said, highlighted just how important Chris is going to be for them going forward, because at this level of production, and obviously, maybe he'll get to a point of, to play more minutes. And again, they all keep insisting, the team, Middleton himself, insisting that he's healthy and this is the plan. And, they want to ease him into it and have him for later in the season. But they just simply need more from Middleton. He said, this level of production is not going to be good enough if they're going to be one of the top teams in the East.
Bobby, are you surprised that they haven't hired a replacement assistant coach for Terry Stotts?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think, Joe Prunty, who's now basically been, I guess, bumped up to number 1, was there before, was the interim coach after Jason Kidd had gotten let go. Certainly was the interim coach in Atlanta also after Nate got let go last year. Was it last year? Last year. So I think if you're comfortable with Joe as your number 1 veteran guy, then that's fine. But I think the Terry Stotts leaving was big just because of the relationship with Lillard from Portland and already having a comfort level there.
Yeah.
And that's a big void.
By the way, there was just a mild Donnybrook in Los Angeles between Anthony Davis and Desmond.
I tell you what, I got the wrong game on. I'm watching Clips Denver. I'm 0 for whatever. There's nothing.
Listen, man, this in-season tournament, the blood's running hot. Maybe this is what the NBA wants. They want.
Well, I know we're not talking Clips, but it feels like the Clippers are at game 80 right now. I don't know if it's that mile high, altitude up there, but they, oof, man, yeah, that's another day.
We'll see what happens with that one. That's it's Nuggets are up by 10 as we speak. Yeah, I just look, we're 10 or 11, 12 games into the season. There's a few teams that are underperforming. The Cavs, for example, they're 4-6. They've had some injury issues and some stuff. The Suns are 4-6, obviously some injury issues. So, like, I don't want to look at the Bucks and be like, oh man, what a, boy, they're really, having some real problems there. They're just underachieving. And I think it's definitely bears watching, especially when you have a rookie head coach. When you have a rookie head coach who's having to deal with that, it's a factor.
Listen, we went. I'm sorry, Jamal. Go ahead.
Well, just that I was going to say, Giannis said it after the game the other night, and I think that it's kind of just to sum it up for them. They're trying to figure out what their identity is. For years, but that identity was really well defined, and the defense with Drew and Brooke kind of at the point of attack and at the rim. It's very obviously Giannis plays a big role in that, but like there was a very clear identity of how they want to play and what they want to do every single night. And because the Dame trade happened a week before training camp, because they have a first year head coach, because they have so many kind of different parts and pieces, I do think that they're on the fly figuring out still what kind of team do we want to be. And their DNA is telling them that they want to be this defensive juggernaut that I'm not sure that their roster right now is going to be able to actually live up to.
I mean, I just look back to, in Brooklyn when we had hired Jason Kidd as a rookie head coach. I mean, Jason didn't even, Adrian was on a bench. Jason wasn't. And you basically like, here you go. Here's your Hall of Fame, quote unquote, team. And they didn't figure it out until Joe Johnson hit a shot in Oklahoma City right after New Year's Day. And the only reason why we figured it out is because Brook Lopez broke his foot in Philadelphia and we were forced to put Garnett at center. I mean,
that's right.
And Pierce at the four.
He had to go small. He had to go small, and it ended up working out for him.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, it worked. That mode worked so well to hire Jason Kidd with no coaching experience that the Nets, with their next iteration of a super team, with a bunch of Hall of Famers, hired Steve Nash with no coaching experience. This is the NBA. Gotta love it. Before we go, Bobby, you and Kevin Pelton are doing a series of rankings of rookies and their performance throughout the season. The first batch of those results, you're basically ranking the rookies. Am I correct in saying that?
We are. Well, the first article is coming out on Thursday. It's kind of like an intro to what we're doing. We do have rankings kind of in the tail end, but of course, there's a big deep dive into Chet and where Victor is right now. I think both of us agree that Chet is probably, if we were voting rookie of the year after 10 games, which doesn't happen, probably Chet is probably a little bit of a head. But I think there's, I understand the rules of a player who misses a year and is still eligible for rookie of the year, but Chet's got a big advantage over Victor from last year. I think, I know he didn't play, but I think just being with that Oklahoma City team, being able to see all 30 teams up close and personal, basically he's got a scouting report in his head. And there was little roster turnover to this Thunder team. They basically only added 3 new players that he could, as I wrote in it, like basically he could visualize as far as where he likes the ball, where he likes to be, the comfort level. Where with Victor, it's, I think Pop said it's basically like this is a trial and error year, and then we're going to basically kind of figure out how to, figure out how to, evolve the offense around him. Especially there's, the point guard situation with Sohan as far as who's, running the show. And so we do a big deep dive into those two guys. And it's funny, both of them played Tuesday night, and it was like basically watching like Rocky 7, right? Like the seventh, like it was like, oh my God, we could have just ended after Rocky 3 or Rocky 4. And so, they both certainly struggled, which is to their rookies. But Kevin had texted me because we have Asar Thompson, number 3 on our rookie rankings. And he tongue in cheek said, anyway, we can change the article and put Asar number 1, who has played,
awesome.
That guy gets 3 rebounds walking out to the jump ball at center court.
He had 9
rebounds.
He had 9 midway through the first quarter the other night against, and the Bulls missed 8 shots in a row to start the game off, so it was pretty easy to just grab him. But it was just incredible.
Well, he had, in one of the stats I have, he had 13 steals and 19 blocks in his first 10 games, the most since Marcus Camby's in 96-97. He had 4 blocks against Phoenix, although they are the Fred VanVleet type blocks where they're strips, not full. There are 2 of them are strips, 2 are, were blocks here. And his teammate, Marcus Sasser, has played at a high level. Now, here's the thing, which is going to be interesting. With Jaden Ivey back, and you're trying to integrate Ivey into the rotation, Sasser plays 8 minutes in their loss to Atlanta. And we have him 4th on on our rookie rankings here. But yeah, I mean, we go into it deep dive. I mean, certainly Scoot.
I wonder if the Pistons have any interest in Zach LaVine, Jamal. I said I wonder. Okay, just to be clear, I wonder.
I'm doing the trade. I'm doing
Sorry,
the
Bobby.
pieces in my
I didn't
head.
mean to. I didn't
Jamal's
mean to.
doing math in his head. He's trying to
I'm
think
looking.
125% within who is on
I mean, legit.
Bojan.
Yeah, they have
How do
guys
we
that
get the
make that much
numbers?
money. Boy.
But that's the other thing about Asar is the Pistons are awful. They're awful.
Yeah.
And you know who else has been awful is the Spurs, and that's the thing. So,
Yeah.
so this is the first, Tuesday night's the first Victor Chet game. I went to the preseason game that they played in October, and it was absolutely amazing. I talked about it on the pod. Like, they both scored 20 points in the first half. They were both one-upping each other. It was like, holy Moses. They had this high is high profile of as a junior game has ever been when they played each other in the World Cup final a couple years ago. So I wrote this big story for ESPN today about like their potential rivalry, and I understand that it's really hard to project rivalries. You can't just, especially in the NBA, you can't just declare this is going to be a rivalry. It's unwise to do that. But these guys, one plays in Oklahoma City, one plays in San Antonio. They both have similar style games. Both rookies. They also have an edge to the way they play, and I've felt that they have an edge towards the way they play against each other. Not that it's like hatred or anything, although maybe down the line. But I think that both of them are acutely aware of what the other one can do, and how they're linked. So I get all excited about this game tonight. I thought TNT was really smart for putting this one on national television. I think the second meeting between the two teams is in January. I think is also on national TV. But anyway, Wemby goes 4 of 15 in this game, scores 8 points. And he did have 14 rebounds. And Holmgren wasn't much better. He went 3 of 10, had 9 points. Neither of them cracked 10 points. It's a 40-point game. I think it ended up being a 35-point spread. It was a 40-point game. And TNT ended up checking out of it and putting on other games. So not the greatest first meeting for the two of them on national TV. I stand by what I said. I'll just go back just because I was there. I mean, there's been a bunch of different guys who've been, ticketed to be rivals, but I'll just go back to when I was there, like the fourth or fifth game of LeBron's rookie year, his first home game, he plays Carmelo in, and it was, made for TV matchup, Carmelo LeBron. And LeBron was absolutely horrible in that game. I think he had 5 or 7 points, 3 of 15 or something. Carmelo was okay. He was better than LeBron, but he wasn't anything special. And the hero of the game was Earl Boykins, who was 5'5". And it was hard. And it was, I think he was TNT or ESPN. I think it was TNT, and much bigger buildup than this. And it was, basically a dud. And
Shea, the hero of this game, at least, is no Earl Boykins.
No, that's true.
My favorite, the Sports Center tweeted the photo of it, but the jump ball between Victor and Chet, and it's just arms. It's just so much arms. I mean, just for a lanky guy growing up too. I wish I could have seen this matchup on my television growing up.
Well, our former colleague Royce Young, who is now a Thunder employee, of course, had to quote tweet that and say that although Victor is taller than Chet, Chet's vertical is higher, and that they're basically even as far as from a size standpoint here. So,
yeah. Well, here's the thing: like, Chet has a big belief in himself, and Victor has a big belief in himself, and their teams can try to downplay however they want the two of them. I'm telling you, having seen with my own two eyes and knowing a little bit about these guys, I don't know if it'll mature. There's a lot of uh, um, stuff that has to happen for it to work, but it's as exciting as a rivalry as we've seen in a long time, in my opinion. And by the way, Asar Thompson tonight, 21 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals against the Hawks for the Pistons, which I think they lost. um, because that's just kind of the way it goes. The Pistons have all these really interesting young players, and all they do is lose. They're 2-10. But the Spurs are getting boat raced right now. Not just tonight, but like they're and Victor is in a pretty significant shooting slump. I think his last 5 games he shot under 40%. He might even, I haven't run the numbers because he was 4 of 15 tonight, but I think he might even be like around 33% the last 5 games. Um, really having a hard time with his shot, which is kind of more what I expected from him after seeing him in summer league. And then he was really good in preseason, and then like lit the world on fire in his first 5 games. So he has come back to earth a little bit. Chet coming into this week was shooting 50, 50, 90. I didn't expect the 50% 3-point shooting to last, um, but yeah, Asar Thompson, Bobby, you know, the rankings are set, but Asar, I'm sure the Pistons fans are going to have something to say when they come out on Thursday.
Well, these are month-to-month rankings, so a lot can change in the month of December. But I think it's real quick. I mean, it is interesting that some of the players that were drafted in the 20s, whether it be Jaime Jaquez in Miami or Julian Strawther in Denver, the teams that, we talked about it a lot in June, teams that didn't have much of a budget and were forced to draft these older players because they didn't have the mid-level exception to go out and sign players in free agency, are now contributing. Jaime had 21, I think, in the win against Charlotte here for a Miami team that's played. I think they've won 6 in a row. Strawther had a 21-point game a week ago in a Denver win here, and you're starting to see contributions from guys like that who are a little bit older and guys who were picked in the 20s. Maybe their upside is not higher than some of the Brandon Millers and the Scoot Hendersons of the world, but can come in and play at a high level right now.
Yeah. And, I think that's one of the things where, I got this lecture when I was a young kid in the NBA that, you always have to, when you draft, you always have to draft for the highest upside, the highest potential, which is why you don't see a lot of 4-year guys get drafted. But sometimes 4-year guys can come in and really make a big impact, and Dame Lillard was one of those guys, so, but I look forward to reading that because, the rookie class, this rookie class, including Holmgren, it's a potential to be a really interesting rookie of the year race. The thing about the LeBron year, LeBron and Melo were relatively close in rookie of the year voting, and LeBron won it, and it wasn't like by 5 votes. I mean, he won it with a little bit of airspace, but it was close. Because Melo's team was so much better, got to the playoffs. And so, if you're arguing for a fact why Chet may be ahead of everybody, is that, I don't think the Spurs and the Pistons are looking like playoff teams, whereas the Thunder are. So I don't know if that's a factor for you, Bobby, but that is something that could end up being a play out as this race, heats up over the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, especially when Oklahoma City will maybe pick up more national TV games, and they'll be more relevant than where when we get past January 1st. San Antonio becomes probably less relevant here.
Well, I would advise, speaking of national TV games, I would advise everybody to take a look at picking up some Pacers games because we mentioned earlier, they snapped the 76ers 8-game win streak tonight in Philly. I did a piece over the summer in Manila during the World Cup because Tyrese Halliburton has yet to appear on TNT. And because he was with the Kings before they were any good, and then he's been with the Pacers, and they haven't been a draw in a small market. And This year, the Pacers got one TNT game, and it's like January 23rd or something like that. And I asked him about it, and he knew the date like that. He's like, January 23rd. And I was like, geez, Tyrese, like, you really know off the top of your head, like what day you're going to be on TNT, like for your first time, it's like that big of a deal. And he's like, well, it's my girlfriend's birthday. So I remembered that. And I was like, okay. But I think he'd only been on ESPN. I think he's only on ESPN like a couple of times. So
Maybe the next one will be December 7th on TNT in Vegas.
Oh, very good.
Neither one of us picked it.
Well, they are 2-0 in group whatever. I don't know which. They are in the driver's seat, having beaten the Cavs and Philly already in that pod in that group. So they are in excellent position to advance to the quarterfinals.
Anybody who hasn't watched the Pacers game yet that may want to tune in after hearing this, you're going to see a lot of points on both ends. They're going to give up a whole lot, but they, I think it's the 7th straight game they score at least 130 points or something like that. They
play super fast. Yeah, they play super fast. They are the number one offense. I don't know where they rank in defense at this moment, but they play super fast. And the thing about Halliburton that's so impressive is he hasn't been turning the ball over. He's got let me see what his last few games are in assist to turnover, but like when you play that fast, you're gonna open yourself up to turnovers, and it just hasn't been happening. So let's see his last 5 games. I'm not finding it here, but
no turnovers again.
His last 2 is 32-0.
Yeah,
just the turnovers.
No turnovers tonight again. I mean,
right. So his last 5 games total, he has 5 turnovers. And let's see if I can find the number of assists. His last. Oh, wait a minute. That's not him. That's Miles Turner. I did this the other day. I hit the wrong thing, and I was like, hey, Andrew Wiggins is averaging 6 points. And I was like, oh, actually, that's Kevon Looney. His last 5 games, he has 6 turnovers his last 5 games. And he has, let's see, you're going to hear me do some math here, 32, 42, 55, 63 assists to 6 turnovers in the last 5 games for him. And he has shot almost 60% in those games as well. A little bit under 60%. And he shoots threes. He's not shooting just layups. So he is red hot right now. And the Pacers are somebody that you may want to check out. Maybe December 7th and December 9th. Actually, I think the quarterfinals are televised on national TV too, Bobby. So if he gets there,
there you go.
I think it's December 3rd or 4th. I think he might get it even sooner. So, all right. Thanks for listening to New Collective Podcast. Thank you to Jackson, our producer, and our new producer here joining us at ESPN and also joining us on the pod tonight, Adrian. Welcome, Adrian, to the Hoop Collective family. Thank you to Bobby. Thank you to Jamal. We'll be talking to you again on Friday with the Tims, and look forward to speaking to you then.